Okay, thank you. There's a lot of people here. Well, I don't know if there's anyone from the public sector working for the public sector. There was marked. Oh, there's one. Okay. So my name is Jani, and I work as a chief senior specialist in Finnish Digital Agency or Digital and Population Data Services Agency, the Digi- ja Väestötietovirasto, which is an interesting name. And I work as a Secretary General of our management board. And about the Finnish Digital Agency, we were established in 2020. So I used to work in the Population Register Center before that. I was actually leading the National Architecture for Digital Services government program, meaning the development of Suomi.fi services, the national shared digital services. And those are the services I'm going to talk about today, and a little bit of what is happening when we're moving towards the digital by default. The interesting thing was that when we started in 2020, merging to a new national agency, you do remember what happened in 2020. We had a kickoff for 900 people in Finlandia House here 5 years ago. And 3 days later, we were on lockdown. So we actually understood that the digital services, whether we are using them as a government officials or what happens with the citizens, are in real crucial. They are the crucial part of our society. We saw a huge jump in the use of digital public services in 2020 and 21, and that has stayed. So we had a shift already. Citizens and people living in Finland actually moved much more quicker than we estimated to use the public digital services. We have about 900 employees. We are a national agency, 36 offices currently all over the Finland, and the shared national services are half of our operations. So we are also providing a lot of services for citizens, from the registering of the birth to the marriages to guardianship services, etc. But I'm not going to talk about those today because I don't have enough time for that. What I'm going to talk about is the national Suomi.fi platform. You don't need to focus on all the separate services. This is a software conference. Some of you probably recognize these. We have the identification service, we have the national portal, we have the e-authorizations, which provides you a digital mandate based on the register or mandate register on behalf of who you can act. So we have these shared national services that are in use in all public digital services. So each time you use any municipalities or government agencies digital service, you are using one or several of this platform. Today I'm focusing on e-identification and the messages and the Suomi.fi mobile, which is kind of the mobile version of the messages service. Messages is the digital post for public sector. How many of you are living in Finland and actually are using the Suomi.fi messages? Have you given the consent? Oh, that's nice percent, because then the rest of you will get it whether you want it or not in 26. And that's what I'm going to talk about. And this is a huge shift. And it's just the first stage when we are moving towards the digital by default with the public digital services. We heard about the marketing, and this is something that's going to be interesting to see how we are going to do this, how the whole public sector is going to do this together, get everybody informed, get everybody on board of these big chains. I'll show you some numbers soon so you understand our problem. How to make sure that these big chains can be done within a year. What is messages service? This is a simplified picture, but it's basically a central service for whole public sector to send all their messages, whichever kind of decisions, request for information, notifications, whatever municipalities, government organizations, welfare areas are sending, they are mandated to send them through Suomi.fi messages. Our service delivers it in digital form for users who have nowadays given a consent, so-called opted in, using the digital post, using the messages, and deliver the messages on paper for those who haven't given the consent. And the ratio is really bad currently on digital compared to the paper post. You might have seen some news later. For example, yesterday, I think there were news like how much tax authorities using money to send paper post, for you when you're all using the Oma Vero service, my tax service already. And this is one of the main drivers behind this. This project, which I'm going to tell you, is also part of the government savings program. So you can see there's a big motivation for us to make this happen. Just to remind you, if you don't use Suomi.fi messages, this is what it looks like. It looks like an email. Obviously, it's not an email. It's a secure messaging system, which we have developed together with the private sector companies. Some of you are probably in here in this conference, representing the companies that are working with us. So all the Suomi.fi services are being built through this public-private partnership. We are purchasing people, the teams from several companies, to actually build these services. So our officials are just setting the targets, setting the KPIs, setting the goals where we are heading based on the legislation, because these Suomi.fi services are based on the legislation, and as I said, they're mandatory for whole public sector to use, but not for the citizens or companies yet. So it looks like a email solution. So basically, it should be very familiar to anyone who's actually just using email. There you can see the mobile application as well. So Suomi.fi mobile application only contains the functionalities of the digital post. It doesn't have other parts of this whole platform. It doesn't include an identification solution or e-authorizations, just the digital post. And this is the new version that we just launched this year. So if you don't yet use messages, go and download the application. That's the quickest and easiest, and start using it. This is our problem. We know based on the statistics of Suomi.fi platform, over there on the red line, you can see the number of unique users using a digital public service in Finland. These are the numbers from 2023. So you see, it has been growing very heavily since 2018. So last year we had approximately 4.3 million unique users who used at least one digital public service. So they had the means, they had the identification tools, they had the knowledge to do something. Maybe they filled an application, maybe they checked into the MyTax service to see whether I need to pay something this year or not. At the same time, the number of users of the digital post has been growing very slowly. And compared to Denmark, we heard about the Danish futurists in the morning. Denmark made this shift 12 years ago. They launched digital post for public sector 12 years ago, and they made it mandatory for companies and citizens to use. They have saved hundreds of millions of euros during the decades, and we are losing that benefit currently in Finland. Other services are very highly used. Finns use digital public services. I mean, the identification service was used 209 million times last year. So that's like a lot. Finns use digital public services, but they haven't given the consent on receiving only digital post. There are several factors in there. We are having this kind of a problem when they are not end users. There might be the government organizations who say, we are not starting to use the digital post until you have a certain amount of end users, because we want to get all our posts in one channel. It needs to go through this for everyone. So this is what we are now going to change. You can see here the potential. I again took some numbers because this is part of the government savings program. So we see how the electronic mail that has been delivered has been growing. It's like a static. We want to change that in 26 to a huge number. So currently, the volume is increasing about 2.5 million digital messages per year. We've calculated the savings at least €1 per message. Well, you can see the prices going through the paper post higher and higher. So that's the minimum. And that doesn't take into account the actual change of the process, what it means when the organizations can automate, for example, their services. Our agency has automated a lot of services based on the legislation that came in effect last year in Finland, that we can have automatic decision-making based digital public services. We are not talking about an AI. not allowed. We can use that for analytics and data and maybe marketing, that sort of things, but not for actual service delivery. That's not allowed in Finland. There's the AI Act coming on the EU, and that needs to be implemented, and then we'll see what kind of possibilities the actual AI gives us as well. But the automated decision making is already a huge step. If you go and want to, let's say, change your name, you do it with our service. That's fully automated. And if you have the messages service, you actually get the decision in 3 minutes. And your name will be registered in population register and delivered to whole society. We've had some interesting cases about people who have decided to return their original surname, maybe on the Friday, Saturday night after bar or something, and then being shocked that it was done. They get the decision already. So that was something that we actually had to figure out a little bit. Should we add a delay or something? You can cancel this. Don't do this during the night when you have a fight with your wife or husband. And about the Finns, this was referred in the morning as well. The futurist said that, the Finns have high digital skills, but the transition is going to need support in all age groups. This is from the Statistics Finland last year. They make this survey on phone, trying to map out the digital skills on different age groups in people living in Finland. Not just the Finnish citizens, but people living in Finland. And as you can see, the biggest problems are going to be with the age groups who have just retired, probably. And this is something that we've seen also in our own research, that when people retire, the digital skills might go down very rapidly. And this is something that we maybe as a society need to figure out, how to keep everybody digital, even after you leave the work life. We can predict that this is happening. But as I can say, the basic skills, 75% of Finns have at least basic skills. And when we define what is basic skills, it is, for example, reading email, using the email application. That's why I'm comparing our digital post for that, because everybody with the basic skills should be able to at least use the messages service. So this is now part of the current government program, and this is what we are implementing in Finnish Digital Agency. So we will gradually shift into making digital services the primary channel, gradually. The first step is the digital post, Suomi.fi messages, which will be made mandatory, amended the legislation that it will be mandatory to those users who already use digital public services. If you don't use digital public service, you can still keep on receiving your paper post. Maybe in the future it might come once a week or once a month. I don't know how that's going to deliver in the future. But anyway, this legislation work is ongoing and the implementation in our agency is ongoing. I'll show you how we're going to do it. And at this point, the goal is that these changes to legislation and the implementation will come into effect in the beginning of 26. That's 1 year from now on. So obviously we have a little bit of a challenge also how to get people to understand what's happening. So this is the implementation program. So obviously the ministries, the Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Finance are amending the legislation, making the legislative preparation work, and in the end next year it's going to go to the Parliament, and obviously the Parliament is going to decide. So we don't yet know, but we need to already do planning and implementation based on something that we still don't know what kind of legislation there's going to be. Our agency is in charge of the actual development of the messages service to adapt to these changes in legislation, but also to plan on how we are going to support all the public sector organizations, how they can communicate to their clients about this change, the customers, and also how are we going to tell and market this thing for everyone living in Finland. And remember, I'm not talking about citizens. I'm talking about anyone registered in population register who has an identification method. So this is not just a Finnish issue, so to speak. And this is what it's going to mean, the jump. So last year we had exactly 4.300 blah, blah, blah million users on digital public services. We know that based on e-identification logs, basically, the data we were talking about. Currently, I took this last week when I had to deliver the presentation, that last week on 12th, we had exactly 1.464 million persons who had consented, opted in, went to Suomi.fi portal or downloaded the application and said, yes, I want only digital post from public sector. So our objective is to get about 2.9 million persons in a year to understand that, no, we are not asking about you anymore. If you're going to whichever service in January 26, when the legislation is in force, hopefully, the first people go to check their taxes. Then we get 2.3 million people who are getting the post automatically after that. And this is something we need to work together with the whole public sector, but also I think with the public, private and third sector. So everybody can understand how big this change is going to be. And it's calculated on the minimum this will generate at least 50 million euros savings for the public sector starting 26. And then it's going to grow, obviously. The more messages are being delivered in digital form. So there's a big expectation from also on the political level, but also from the ministry, that this needs to be done successfully. So we are moving from opt-in to opt-out process. That is something that we still don't know yet exactly how it's going to be happen, because obviously in the future also there's going to be users who are dropping off. You saw the age gap. When you're getting older, typically your digital skills go down. You have to be able to get back to the paper world. So there's going to be an opt-out process for this, but we still don't know how it's going to work. Whether it's going to be a physical service, a phone channel, is it going to be some sort of form? Are we going to do this together with whole public sector? And this is something that I don't know yet, because it depends on the legislation. I only know how we're going to do the opt-in. This is how we're going to do it. Now, actually, this is a prototype. So if you're a software developer, don't say or ask, this is exactly how it's going to look. But as you can see, we are going to do this through e-identification, because the legislation is going to say, if you use digital public service, then you are capable of also receiving digital post. So it's going to be part of the e-identification flow itself in 26. So when you are going now to the My Tax service in 26, you are going to be told, by the way, you are using this public service. From now on, download the mobile app or go to Suomi.fi, you're receiving also digital post. And that's how it's going to be shown. We're going to bring in this in info and, before already, but this is the plan. So it's going to affect a lot of people very quickly. And then, because I was asked to talk about what is the future, I mean, this is the first part. So it's like a first shift on going digital by default. I think it's time for us to start the discussion in society. Where are we? Where do we want to go with the public service delivery? Because if you think about these numbers, we compare to the users 23, which is about this 4.3 million. And we know that we have about 4.5 million adults based on the voters register. So those who are actually allowed to vote, for example. So if you compare, that's nearly 95% of adults in Finland who have already used at least one or several digital public services. So are we actually digital by default in that sense already with the citizens or people living in Finland? So what should or could be those next activities? And this is something, again, I don't know, but there are some discussion points that I would like the society to have? Like, are we going to have the next phase where we are going to make digital services, the messages or all digital services mandatory for companies, for example? Like Denmark has already done, other countries have already done. It's possible. I mean, the skills of the entrepreneurs and the sort of the way the companies are already got used to using digital public service. There are some services that are already mandatory for companies to use in digital form, or you might have just an exception to do something on paper. Would that be the way to go? There's another issue, which is about these citizens' use in Finland. We don't have legislation taking any sort of stand on what does it mean to have assisted use of digital services. We have, as a part of Suomi.fi platform, we have the e-authorizations. You can create a digital mandate based on the law. That's legal way of giving somebody else the right to use digital public service. But we also know that there are a lot of cases, like within family, parents, grandparents, children, husband, wife, you might actually use the digital public services the way that the person just identifies themselves and then other person uses the digital service. Or the worst case, you give the identification method, which you're not allowed to do, obviously, to somebody else. But there's no sort of legal framework on recognizing this. And I think that would be important in the future to correct. How do we see this? People help each other to use the digital services. Should there be like a legislation saying who can do that and based on what? Or should we focus on the actual quality of the digital services, the digital public services, or the coverage? Do we have everything in digital form already? To say that we can, let's say, have this digital by default for the use of digital services, not just the post. Do we need to have more activities on the digital skills? As I said, for some reason, when you're retired, it looks like your digital skills start rapidly going down. Should we investment in public sector for support, for digital support? Or should we go and maximize the use of current legislation by creating more proactive, automated digital services? Because this we can do based on law already. And then the question, what is the role of the generative AI on public services in the future? We are in the conference based on this topic, and I have to say we don't know. The public sector comes a little bit after you anyway, but public sector is going to move there anyway. So should we have the discussion already now? How is this going to be affecting the producing of digital public services in the future? Because I don't know anybody has answers on the public sector. At least I don't have yet. So I will leave with these questions based on where are we moving. And to remind you, download the application, say yes, save money for the public sector already, not wait 1 year when you're mandated to do that. Okay, thanks.